Hey, I'm Michelle, your communications director. I'm spending the next couple of Sundays at both our downtown and Lexington churches to ask people about wisdom. Let's hear what they have to say. As a parent, what is one bit of advice you've given to your kids?
So one piece of advice I give my kids is that life's not fair, but you have to do the right thing anyways.
What's the best piece of advice your parents have ever given to you?
The best piece of advice my mom and dad have given to me are to always be kind to people, probably.
What is the best advice that your parents have ever given you? Who wants to go first?
The best advice my parents give me is don't give up and keep doing what you're trying, and if you do something wrong, just try again.
If there was a situation you don't know how to handle, who are you talking to about it?
My parents, because they would help me through it and they've done it before.
As a parent, what bit of advice do you give to your children?
Yeah.
We use the who's in charge a lot at this point because they're 2 and 4. So listening to mommy and daddy feels like the biggest thing right now.
What is the best piece of advice your dad has ever given to you?
Stay strong.
I think the best piece of advice they gave me was when I was coming to college. They said, find a church quickly, because I've heard a lot of stories about people who they don't make that a priority, and then it's just really hard to find that community the farther and farther along you get.
All right, we've got the Humphreys here this morning with us, almost the whole crew. All right, what is one piece of advice you guys have given to all of your kids?
I think one piece of advice that I've given our kids is to go to bed early. Don't stay up late.
What is the best piece of advice your parent has given you?
Maybe just to read more, even though I don't really do it.
The best piece of advice for me is to know that God has a plan and that everything will be okay.
Best advice is that trust God, that he will know what you do in the future. That no matter what I want to do, it's what God wants.
All right, you've heard it from the Humphreys. Go to bed early, read a book, trust God.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's really, really good. Man, I don't know. So Milestones was this weekend, which is our annual parenting conference, and apparently we're doing something right, guys. I don't know. Like, I love those answers from the kids, man. That was really, really awesome. It's good to see you. How are you? Yeah? Good. If you're a guest, my name's Michael. I'm one of the pastors here. It's a joy and honor, as always, to get to be with you as a little family as we open up God's Word together in our Wisdom series. I want to ask you a question. Do you remember your first paycheck? You remember that? Yeah, me too. One of my first jobs as a teenager was working in a barbecue joint in my hometown of Greenwood. I was like turning pigs on the smoker and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember that magical moment where the boss lady delivered to me that crisp envelope that, man, it smelled like, it smelled like barbecue, but it also smelled like accomplishment and possibility, right? I was about to have money. Like real money that meant I could go do the things that I wanted to go do, buy the things that I wanted to buy. I could just taste the freedom and the opportunity. And I remember opening it, and my first thought was, who is FICA? And why are they getting so much of my hard-earned cash? Like, what is happening here? And thus began my ongoing complicated relationship with money and wealth. Money is a funny thing, isn't it? It has the power to make us feel all kinds of ways. It can make us feel joyful. It can make us feel scared. It can bring a sense of security and often even a sense of frustration. And the reality of it is we all have a relationship with money to one degree or another, a relationship that to some degree has been shaped by a variety of factors. For some of us, we grew up with an abundance mindset where you just kind of assume that money is going to find its way to you because it always has. It's been what you've always known. Others of us have a scarcity mindset because you can remember times where your family didn't know if you'd have enough to get through the month, and now you are determined to never be in that spot for yourself. Some of us worry a lot over money, no matter how much or how little we may have. We have this latent fear that maybe it's just not going to be enough. In fact, the American Psychological Association said that money is the top cause of stress in the United States. Roughly 72% of Americans are stressed out about money. Some of us are spenders. Some of us are savers. Some of us are in debt and some of us aren't. Some of us feel really good about the future, and some of us are just trying really hard to not think about it all that much. And the point is, for better or worse, we all have a relationship with money and wealth. And that relationship affects how we live and who we become. Now, as you may have noticed throughout the series so far, the Bible is deeply aware of all the realities of our lives. It is deeply aware of life's complexities and difficulties, the places that require us to think well and wisely about how we live. As we've said, this is actually what the wisdom literature in Scripture is all about. And the good news for us is that the Proverbs specifically are well aware of all of these things when it comes to how we relate to money and wealth as well. And as we'll see, it actually has quite a bit to say and quite a bit to teach. And so here's what I want to do. I want to read a bunch of the things that Proverbs says to us about our wealth and money, and just to kind of help you see what I mean. So let's start with Proverbs 21:20. This is what it says. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling. So that's riches. So that's wealth. Wealth is in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Proverbs 10:4-5. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Proverbs 28:19. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. So here from the jump, we see, so the wise, the prudent, work hard and make money. They save, they prepare, they plan. That's what a wise person will do, says the Proverbs. But now listen to this. This is Proverbs 11:4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. A few verses later in verse 7, when the wicked dies, his hope will perish, and the expectation of wealth perishes too. You see that? In one place, the Proverbs say it's wise to grow and gain wealth, but here they say, yeah, but that's only going to go so far. It's not actually going to profit where it counts. In fact, listen to these harder words a few verses later. Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. Proverbs 28:11, a stingy man hastens after wealth and does not know that poverty will come upon him. A few verses later, a faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Here the Proverbs say that there are dangers that come along with how we relate to money. That despite conventional thinking, having a lot of money isn't always sunshine and rainbows. That Biggie was really onto something when he said, "Mo money, mo problems." He's tapping into something eternal here. And so in light of all of this, Proverbs paints a different picture of how the wise relate to their money. This is Proverbs 11. One gives freely and yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and the one who waters will himself be watered. And I think the one that summarizes the whole thing well comes from Proverbs 3, verses 9-10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. So as you can see, when it comes to money, Proverbs has a lot to say, and it has a lot of different things to say. And chances are you feel some of this when you think about how you relate to your wealth. There's so much to consider, right? There's so much to think about. How should we think about saving? How should we think about investing? How should we think about changing jobs? How should we think about using credit cards and going into debt? How should we think about giving and all kinds of things in between? And if you're anything like me, all right, like you maybe want to be wise with what you have, but there's always this little voice in the back of your head questioning your decisions, right? Like, is that really the right move? Should I have done something different here? And what I want you to see is that the wisdom literature really embraces that reality. And while it doesn't propose to answer every single financial question or concern that we may have, what it does is actually it gives us a holistic view of what it means to be wise with wealth. that can help us relate to money well, no matter how much or how little of it we may have. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to kind of unpack these verses a little bit more for us and expose to us 3 money principles that I think we glean from the Proverbs. 3 money principles that when we embrace them will set us right in the middle of God's design, intention, and wisdom for wealth. So you probably saw their movements in the passage earlier, but we'll go back, and what we want to do is I want to go back and highlight each one. And so here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with money principle number 1. First thing to know about money when it comes to being wise with it is go get it, all right? Go get it. So you see this smattered across many of these passages that I read earlier. Proverbs 10, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. And these are just a small sampling. There are plenty more. But the wisdom literature over and over and over again connects working hard and making money as the path that the wise person takes. The Proverbs consistently connect hard work and insight, creativity, and discipline with prospering financially. The wise person appropriately gives their energy to the things that will generate income. And here's the thing, I want to start here because if we're ever going to be wise with money, okay, we have to understand that the Proverbs describe wealth as a good thing, all right? I want you to hear that. The Bible describes wealth as a good thing. Scripture presents wealth as a gift to be worked for, a gift to be received with gratitude, a gift to be used for godly purposes. And depending on where you're coming from, this is why I bring it up, like that might sound surprising to you. It might sound surprising to you. As strange as it may sound, there can be this like weird Christian belief that somehow trying hard to make money is somehow wrong. And that if someone has money, particularly more money than I have, then they are wrong. Like even cultural sentiment these days kind of swings this way a bit, that if you have money, you're kind of the problem, right? You guys have picked up on this. And obviously, that comes from all the warnings that Scripture does, in fact, give us about it. But what tends to happen is that the dangers can get taught in an out-of-balance way that kind of can give us the impression that, I guess God kind of hates money a bit, right? And so the thought then becomes that the Christian thing to do is to basically try to avoid it, to try to separate ourselves from it as much as possible, to be unconcerned with it, to try to have as little of it as we possibly can, maybe only enough to just make ends meet, or at the very least, we shouldn't talk about it. We should just kind of like set it to the side and sort of ignore the elephant in the room when it comes to wealth. And the consequence of that is that money and wealth get turned into these necessary evils, so to speak. That the spiritual person, what the spiritual person's really trying to do is detach themselves from or separate themselves from at all costs. And what we don't realize is that when we do that, we separate a significant part of ourselves from our faith. Because we all have to work, right? We all have to make money to survive. And when we treat money and wealth like it's this necessary evil or this thing over here, we functionally cut our lives into two. That there's my faith over here, and then there's my work and my career and what I do to earn an income over here. And these two things, they're just never meant to really go together. Like, for example, some of us don't know what to do with our ambition to build a career and build businesses that create jobs for other people. We don't know what to do with the job that we have or how to think about the money that we have been provided with. For example, I know that some of you right now are making more money than you ever thought possible in your entire life, and you feel guilty for it. You feel like it's a bad thing. On the flip side, there's some of you who feel superior to others because you don't make a ton. You think your lack of making money makes you somehow more righteous than other people. And still others of us feel lesser than because you work hard at what you think is just a normal job and you're just kind of making enough to, help your family, and that doesn't really matter all that much. And all of those thoughts have their roots in this faulty belief. And what I want you to hear me say is that is not how God sees any of that stuff. That's not how God sees your job. That's not how God sees the money you make. These are not biblical ideas about your wealth or your work. What I want you to hear is God invented these things. It's not like he's looking down from heaven like, oh my gosh, What are these humans doing? All figuring out a means of commerce and how to provide and all that. It's like he's not surprised. Like this is a part of how he designed our societies to work. He's not surprised at all. He intends for money and wealth and the like to be the vehicle by which he provides for you, blesses you, sustains your life, and even cares for others around you. And the Proverbs want you to realize this, that the wise person embraces the fact that God is for you earning money and figuring out how to earn money. In fact, these verses would say it's your responsibility to do so. And the person who doesn't is not just a fool, but unfaithful. And the point that I just want you to get is that earning wealth, having wealth, generating wealth is the wise, responsible, faithful, and God-honoring way to relate to money. So have that ambition. Have that ambition. Embrace that grind, right? Build that business or career. Young people, go get that job and get that paycheck. That's a good thing. And that has just as much to do with following Jesus as anything else, because God isn't anti-money. But you got to know, and this is the second thing that Proverbs will show us, that while God isn't anti-money, money can be anti-God. Money can be anti-God. And that's money principle number 2, that you need to be careful when you have it. You need to be careful when you have it. So this is where the Proverbs remind us of the other side of the proverbial coin. Proverbs 11:4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Verse 7, when the wicked dies, his hope will perish, and the expectation of wealth perishes too. Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. Point is that while money is a good thing, it's not everything. And there are limits to what money can actually do. And to be wise with money is to recognize this and therefore keep our relationship with money in the appropriate place. To say it a little bit differently, wealth becomes anti-God when we elevate it to God's place in our lives. You understand what I'm saying? Wealth becomes anti-God when we elevate it to the status or the place that God is meant to occupy. This is how Proverbs 18 is going to say it. It's going to say the name of the Lord is a strong tower. So God is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe. A rich man's wealth is his strong city and like a high wall in his imagination. All right, just to unpack that just a little bit. In the ancient world, cities were a place of security, okay? The city was surrounded by walls to keep out wild animals and invaders. And outside of the city, you were basically on your own. And so notice the intentional contrast that the writer here is trying to give us. The righteous knows that God is their ultimate refuge. The righteous knows that God is their strong tower. But the rich imagine that their wealth is. The rich imagine that their money is going to be able to do for them what God can only in fact do. This highlights the chief temptation when it comes to money. For money to basically take the place of God in your life. For money to become that thing that you look to for security. That thing that you think is going to actually take care of you when the bottom falls out. For money to be that thing that you think provides you with identity, or status, or worth. For money to be that thing that you think is going to be the thing that delivers to you the good life, that will deliver to you the happiness and the contentment and the joy that you think your life currently lacks. In essence, for money to become your functional God. And here's the reality. Wealth is a good gift, but it is a bad, bad God. It's a bad God. Because at bare minimum, it is a very fleeting thing. Your wealth, no matter how great or small it is one economic downturn, one market crash, one world war, or even just simply one divorce away from being completely gone, from being completely demolished, from it not mattering at all. And maybe you're like, nah, bro, I'm in Bitcoin. That's the future. It's going to be fine, whatever. Listen, give it time. Give it time. Nothing is foolproof, and nothing lasts forever. And this is the drum that these verses just keep beating. At the end of the day, worshiping wealth will not and cannot take you where you want to go. When wealth is your God and you don't have it, you know what happens? You feel ruined. You feel lost. You feel like you don't know where to go. You'll feel crushed, like you don't know where your worth or your identity or sense of security come from. They're just hanging by a thread. When wealth is your God, you become a person who will give up their integrity to get it. A God of wealth is a thing that will drive you to get it in unethical ways. It will drive you to take advantage of others. It'll try to drive you to gamble with things that you don't need to be gambling with and the like. When wealth is your God, you will go places and do things that you never thought you would. You will sacrifice relationships and family and time that you can never get back just for the sake of having a little bit more. When wealth is your God, you'll find yourself in a never-ending cycle of consumption and discontent. You'll go into debt that you don't need and may never be able to get out of because the thought of just a little bit more feels like it's going to be the thing to deliver to you the good life. And now that just a little bit more has become a master and you have become its slave. And some of you feel that right now. And I know it. Some of you feel all of that tension and burden and stress. For some of you, the stress you feel around money exists because you have made it God, because you have made it ultimate in your life. You've put it in a place that it was never meant to be put. And here's the thing. This is actually something that most people figure out. They just figure it out too late. So I came across a really interesting video on the internet the other day. It was one of those like on the street type interviews similar to our bumper for this series. And the whole premise was to find retired folks and ask them, what is the one thing that they wish they knew when they were younger, or the one bit of advice that they would want to pass down to those who are younger than them? And the guy interviewed tons of people, and I kid you not, virtually every single one of them said virtually the same thing, and many of them through tears. Money isn't everything. There's so much else out there worth giving your time and energy to. Money is not the end all be all. And for what it's worth, this is something we try to say consistently when we talk about money. And why we try to teach about it often, because over and over and over again, the scriptures are going to tell us that how we relate to money is fundamentally a spiritual issue. It's fundamentally a spiritual issue. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus makes it plain that your heart and your wallet are connected. Whether you like it or not, they are connected. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The scriptures are always trying to get us to understand this, that when we talk about money, listen, let me just be real clear with you. I know it gets really weird when pastors talk about money and everybody's like, oh, okay, pastor just wants it. I don't want your money, all right? I'm not after your money. I'm after your heart. Like, my vision for us as a people is that we would be a people who are so in love with Jesus, who run to Jesus as our strong tower, who believe and stand firm in Jesus over and above everything else, okay? And I just have to get you to realize that to do that is going to fundamentally be connected to your bank account. It can't not. And you got to realize that, because that temptation is always going to be there. What's going to be God in my life? When we teach on money, this is not about function, but about formation. Are we becoming a people who trust the Lord to be our strong tower? Or do we believe that's actually the S&P? And listen to me. You do believe one of those things. You do. One of them is your God. And Jesus says you cannot serve both. And man, I want so badly for us to keep getting that, to understand that what we do with our money is not just about what we do with our money. It's about our heart. It's always about our heart. And so I want us to be wise with money, to work hard and go get it. But I do not want us to be deceived about what it can actually do. I don't want us to be deceived about its limits. Which brings me to the third thing that I think we see in these passages. There is an essential third leg to this financial stool, so to speak, that can't be missed or it will fall over. We can't have a healthy relationship with money without this third piece. It's unavoidable for wise living, and it is more critical, honestly, than any of us in the room probably think it is. And this is the third money principle: to give away more than you think you can. The wisdom from the Proverbs is to give away more than you think you can. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but listen to those words from Proverbs 11. One gives freely and yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and the one who waters will himself be watered. In Proverbs 3, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. If I were to summarize all of the Bible's teaching and wisdom on wealth, I'd probably do it from Proverbs 3 right there, to honor the Lord with your wealth. And these verses indicate that the way we do that is to give, to be a generous, a sacrificially generous people. That's where wisdom is found. That giving, namely sacrificial giving, is an essential ingredient to your formation and wise financial living. It's like sugar in the cake, right? Like it's not the only ingredient, but if it isn't there, it's not a cake you want to eat. You feel what I'm saying? Like, and this is for what it's worth. Like this is not just me saying this. Like the secular world is beginning to catch up with this idea. So there's a secular psychologist named Adam Grant who's at the Wharton Business School with the University of Pennsylvania. It's actually one of the top business schools in the world. And he recently published a book called Give and Take. And it's the summation of his research of roughly 30,000 Americans over the past 20 years, where he's seeking to discern what most effectively contributes to personal happiness and success. Personal happiness and success. And his conclusion is wild. According to Grant, the key to personal happiness and success comes down to one single thing. Generosity is what he says. That the more a person gave, the happier and more successful they actually became. It's the exact same thing that these Proverbs are saying right here. Giving, he concluded, was a life-changing habit in the best way possible, inextricably tied to personal happiness and success. He's just catching up with what Scripture has been saying the entire time. Ancient and modern voices are starting to align that the path to real success, the path to greater wealth, the path to great joy is found through giving. It's found through generosity, through not just hoarding for ourselves, but giving away to bless others and bless the world. And the reason I want to make sure you see that is because for some of us, here's what I know. I know every time we bring up something like this in church, our minds immediately just start to detour to guilt, right? Like I bet some of you are even feeling that right now. I'm not trying to do that to you this morning, okay? We detour to guilt. We start to feel bad, like, yeah, all right, yeah, I know I should give. Like we think of it like it's this thing that you don't really want to do and you kind of believe is going to hurt you, but you're obligated to do it. Listen, if that's you, I want you to hear, you're missing the point. You're missing what the Bible is actually trying to tell us here. Biblically speaking, generosity isn't about a pathway to pain. It's about a pathway to joy. It's about a pathway to happiness. It's the pathway to more of what you actually want out of life. It's the pathway to you becoming more like the person you actually want to become, a person who is more like God. The only question is are we going to believe it or not? Are we going to believe that what the Bible is saying is true? To say all of this a little bit differently, when it comes to money, if you want to have a healthy relationship with money, if you want to be truly wise financially, then what we have to do as God's people, is we have to learn to bring the cross into our economic life. That's what we have to do. And I got that language from the late Pastor Tim Keller, and I'm just going to let him say it because I think he says it better than I ever could. But listen to this. This is what he says. He says, Jesus didn't save you by tithing his blood, and you live by his giving of everything. Jesus' cross means sacrificial giving. Don't you dare think you are being wise about money if your giving is not making a measurable difference in the way in which you live. If it's not making a measurable sacrificial difference in the way you do things, in the way you take vacations, in the way in which you buy your clothes, in the way in which you live, you haven't brought a cross into your economic life. That's wisdom. Jesus Christ gave himself away, and look at his harvest. Me, you. Why are we gathered here? Why are we together? Why do we love each other? Why do we have each other? He got scattered and we're gathered. Now you go and do likewise. That's him. That's not me. So take it up with him if you're mad, okay? But this is what the Proverbs is saying. This is what Scripture is begging us to wrap our minds around, that if you want to be wise, if you want to honor God with your wealth, if you want joy in it, then you've got to treat it like Jesus. You've got to let Jesus step in and become Lord of your budget. You've got to let the person and work of Christ influence how you think about all of these things. This is the path to true life. This is the path to financial health. This is the path to keeping money in its right spot and maximizing it for the greatest return. You got to let Jesus be the template and the king for your budget. Who, as 2 Corinthians 8:9 says, that though he was rich, yet for your sake became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. It was the generosity of Jesus that saved you. His willingness to give all of himself to make you God's child, both for now and forever. His willingness to lay it all down for your sake, that you might have eternity in his kingdom, that you might have the fullness of joy, life forever in the presence of God, where every tear is wiped away, all the painful things are done, and death itself is no more. His life cost that, but he gives it to you. He gives it to you. It's incredibly generous. As Hebrews says later, it was for the joy set before him to do so. Jesus didn't look at that cost like it was a cost he didn't want to pay, but he knew that generosity was joy for him. He was pleased to do it because he knew what was coming. To say it a bit differently, what you do with your money always shapes who you become. There's no path to discipleship to Jesus that does not involve your money. There's no path to the joy that he wants for you that doesn't come by following his example here. And as much as some of us would love to cut that part out, he won't allow it because he loves us. It's far too important and shapes us too much for him to neglect. But I particularly love how Keller concludes that point. He says, look, don't you see what Jesus' generosity did? Don't you see the fruitfulness of it? Look around the room. Look at all the other faces you are surrounded by right now. Jesus' sacrificial giving had an unimaginable return on investment. And that's what the Proverbs are saying here about your giving too. The temptation when it comes to generosity is to feel like it only means that we are losing something, losing some luxury, losing some desire, losing some possible future. And in a sense, sure, that's true. There is a loss in sacrifice, but that's not the complete picture. That feeling can also reveal that we may not be seeing things very clearly, because when we give, we actually multiply things that we don't see. When we give, we multiply spiritual fruit and influence. When you give, you actually become a benefactor to things that God is doing that you may never even be in the room for. You become a benefactor to all the eternal fruit, all the eternal harvest that he is actually cultivating. So for example, every time you give to the ministry of our church, when someone gets into that pool and gets baptized, you had a part in that. Even though you maybe have never spoken to them, even if you didn't even know their name before they got into the tub, you played a part in that. When a need is met through our church, like when a single mom has rent covered, or when a family gets help when ends aren't meeting, you played a part in that, even if you never knew it. When a child in Kid Town hears the gospel and families begin to change, you play a part in that. When someone joins a life group and finds community and grows in their faith, you are playing a part in that. When a marriage gets restored, you played a part in that, even if you were never in the room. And it's not just church giving, it's all of it. It's all the generosity. It's all the times you choose to spend money on welcoming others into your home for a meal instead of just spending it for your own selfish purposes. It's all the times you choose to sacrifice your comfort now for the sake of somebody else's need. All of that is joining in God's eternal harvest. And if the scriptures are to be believed here, not an ounce of that is going to return empty. Not an ounce of that is going to be wasted or an investment that you are going to eternally regret. Instead, it'll be one that you are eternally grateful for. And so all of that is to say that if you were to show a really savvy, non-Christian financial planner your budget, they should be like, what are you doing? Why are you giving so much away? Are you sure about this? Do Do you know what kind of vacation you could be taking? Do you know what that could do if you were to put it into a growth fund? That's what these passages are trying to help you see, that God's wisdom for wealth, it looks different. It's after something different. It values something different, something better and more eternally rewarding. And this is what led C.S. Lewis to famously say, I do not believe we can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditure on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc., is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. And listen, I'm not trying to come after us. I need you to hear me again. I am not after your money. I am after your heart. Please hear me on that. I know this stuff is difficult. I'm after your heart, and I'm not trying to come after this, but hear me. Some of you are going to try to tell your life group this week that you honor God with your wealth. Actually, some of you are just not going to go to life group this week, so you don't have to talk about it. But others of you, all right, are going to go to life group this week, and you're going to try to tell them that you're honoring God with your wealth. But the truth is you're actually just doing what a sharp non-Christian would do. You do not have generosity in ways that honor God with your wealth. And it shows that you are not embracing this reality, that you don't believe perhaps God's ways are actually all that wise. It shows what you really believe. You're not storing treasure in heaven. You might give, but only in a way that makes you feel like it's not costing you anything of merit. And what the scriptures want us to see is that's just not the way of Jesus. It's not the way of Jesus. And it's not the way of the wise. And you need to let these verses challenge you and change you. Not to take something away from you, but to give you something more than you ever thought possible. You know, I'm telling you, this is true. My wife and I have been living this way for a long time, and giving hurts. It does. We will both tell you there is a pain with giving, but there is such unimaginable blessing that comes along with being made more like Jesus and seeing the fruit of Jesus. Honestly, in y'all. Every time I look and see one of your faces, I think, man, this is what our giving is doing. This is what God is making happen through the generosity of our people. And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But it does beg the question, okay, what does it look like when we put all of these things together? Well, there's another proverb I would like to take you to. This is Proverbs 27. It says, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. For riches do not last forever, and does a crown endure to all generations? So right here, this is a little complex, right? Because he's talking in ancient terms. But the writer says, hey, know the condition of your wealth well. Know the condition of your flocks and plan. If we want to embody the wisdom of God in our wealth, then we're going to have to form a plan to do so. And so here's maybe like a bonus money principle for us as we close, that the wise person plans to be wise with their wealth. The wise person plans to be wise with their wealth. No matter what your relationship is to money, if you want it to be a wise one, you need to plan for wisdom. Call it a budget, call it a wealth management plan, call it whatever you want. The wise person has a plan to get money, a plan to be careful with its dangers, and a plan to give it away like Jesus. And so I know there are some of us in here who feel the weight of relating to money foolishly, right? Like you feel the pressure that it's going places out of your control and it needs reining in. Hear me, you need a plan. I know there are some of you here who are in a place that there is no external pressure on you. You're comfortable, ends meet, and you think, well, I'm not in duress, so I guess I'm good, right? The bills are paid, we're contributing to retirement, we give a little bit, we're good. Listen, if that's you, you need a plan too. Just because things aren't, hitting the fan doesn't mean you don't need a plan. In fact, you probably need more of a plan, not less of one. Because according to Jesus in Luke 12, the more you have, the more responsibility you have, and therefore the more of a plan you will actually need. To say it a little bit more directly, if you don't have a plan for how to incorporate these principles into your wealth, you do have a plan. It's just a plan to be foolish and unfaithful. But admittedly, that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do on your own. And so I want you to know, we as a church family, we want to help with this. We all want to be pushing into this direction together. And so we've got some stuff that we want to offer to help. This summer, we're offering some resources to help us all grow to be wise here, all right? First, If wise financial management is an area of needed growth for you, all right, we are offering our personal finance seminar coming up on June 22nd. It's a bit like our money management 101 course. So if, for example, you don't have a budget where you know where your money is going and your credit card statement is always like this fun but stressful surprise at the end of the month, all right, this class is for you. All right. If you're in meaningful debt and don't know how to get out, or if you're taking the ostrich method towards retirement where you're just sticking your head in the sand and hoping for the best, whatever, the personal finance seminar is a great next step for you. However, if you're in a slightly different place, if you have a budget and you're out of bad debt, you understand the power of compound interest and use it to prepare for the future, but you know you need to press further in on these principles we talked about today, then we have another action step for you. And it's a bit of an experiment. We're beta testing it. It's the first time we've ever done anything like it. We're calling it our wealth management cohort because that sounds really fancy and awesome, all right? But it's a wealth management cohort, and it's going to start on June 23rd, so the next day. And it's going to be a group that meets together throughout the summer to study, discuss, and plan for what it looks like to invest your blessing wisely and well, not just for the present, but for eternity. And for what it's worth, it's not going to be led by me. It's not going to be led by any of our other pastors, but by church members who are faithfully walking this path currently. And so if you're a person who's in a place where you have more resources than you thought you would, and you're trying to figure out how to steward them well, knowing that in our culture, statistically speaking, the more wealthy someone is, the more that sets that person up for these dangers, and the less generous they tend to be percentage-wise, this is for you. And I want you to know spots are going to be limited, and there's a cost for materials. So if you want to be a part of this, you need to sign up quickly, okay? But here's the deal, and this is where we'll land. We are called to be wise with our money. It's not only smart, but it's righteous. But like so many other areas of our life, we have often been unwise and foolish. And the good news for us, as always, is that God has not left us to our own devices, but he has sent his son on a mission to save us from all of our folly and sin, financial or otherwise. Like that passage from 2 Corinthians we read before, Christ became poor so that we might become spiritually rich. And in just a few moments, we're going to take a meal that reminds us of that reality, a meal that we call communion or the Lord's Supper. It is given by Jesus to his disciples and an instruction that every time we take it, we are to take it in remembrance of him. It's bread and wine that represent his body broken for us and his blood generously given to us to make us his own. And so if you're a Christian in the room, when the band gets back up here and plays, you are invited to come and eat this morning, and let it be a reminder to you of God's great generosity for you. The generosity that brought you here, that brought you into his family for forever. Let's pray.